People say we need police to protect us from ourselves. Maybe it is true, I don't know, but what if there was a counter argument? Probably think, sheesh, police protect us, bro. For one, police and government kill more innocent people than civilians ever have. In the 20th century alone, governments around the world killed 200 million people in acts of democide. That's more than half the size of the entirety of the United States of America. Do you understand? Imagine half the United States being wiped out. More than half. That amount of bodies dropped in the 20th century due to government slaughtering its own people. Believe it or not, your average gangbanger and carjacker doesn't kill that many people. In summary, murder by average civilians pales in comparison with the deaths done by those in government. Government is the #1 serial killer in the entire world, and here you are laughably hiring the government to protect you. From who, you may ask? From your peaceful neighbor. Why? Because the government told you he was dangerous and you must be taxed, regulated, and enslaved to meek out a very existence. That is a bunch of bullshit, dude. Your peaceful neighbor doesn't want to hurt you, and even if they did, the police don't protect you from it, not even now. Make no mistake, police only exist to collect fines, not to protect. Look up Warren versus District of Columbia if you don't believe me, or DeShawnee versus Winnebago County Department of Social Services, where they concluded the police didn't need to protect the son from his abusive father. What about Castle Rock versus Gonzalez? A woman sued the police for failing to protect her from her husband after he violated a restraining order and abducted and killed her 3 children. Justices said the police had no such duty. And in the Parkland shooting, where 17 children died, the police weren't held accountable even though they were on the scene, literally hiding, because they had no duty to protect from the mass shooter. That is some bullshit. Police are a bigger detriment to your health and safety than a help because they give you the illusion of safety. So you're going to walk around unarmed probably, without a gun or knife. I'm sure you do it every day. It's stupid. And when someone comes up with a weapon of any sort, you are dead because the police are 10 minutes away. It's a dumb plan. Hear me out. Wouldn't it be better not having police at all and people had the illusion of danger? So everyone packs a weapon for safety, so they actually have a chance of survival if someone tries to hurt them. And you may say, oh, well, not having police around, well, no one can protect me. Well, they're 10 minutes out anyways. They can't protect you at all. By the time you make the phone call and they show up, it's already too late. The bad guys are gone. Or they've already killed you. One of the two. All they're good for is outlining your body in chalk. Being aware of your surroundings and packing a weapon increases your chances of survival by like 10-fold. Walking around unarmed and waiting to be an easy victim is not the way to push society forward. And police give you the false illusion that doing so is safe. It isn't. Walking around without a weapon is like the worst mistake you could ever make. And I think if people knew police were gone, they'd be more responsible and carry more often, which would solve the problem completely. Also, hear me out. What if instead of having police, we replace them with private security? Private security are on the scene already and can protect you in like 3 seconds as opposed to the 10 minutes like police always do. And the value of that cannot ever be overstated. And 50% of your income doesn't need to be taxed just to get private security like you do police. The businesses pay for them. The apartment complex, the homeowner association as well. So it's not just the businesses where you get protection, it's where you live. Well, without massive government, who will build the roads, you ask? The darn businesses, just like they do with private security. They need to build roads to the businesses in the first place just to get the machinery down there to build the place. The road is the very first thing they build, dummy, and it doesn't require government to do. Who's going to protect us from drugs? You are. Education from the mother and father is the best bet for this. Let them know the dangers of drugs. Let them know 90% of people who try heroin or meth never quit it, and it absolutely destroys their lives, their ability to function, their teeth, and it will eventually most likely kill them very young. You don't need government to enforce these things to be illegal. Making them illegal, all it does is make the people who sell it risk being arrested for selling it. So you're probably wondering, why does that matter? Why does it matter if their job's risky? Well, if you make it risky, like them going to prison and stuff, they're going to kill to not go to prison. So they're going to kill civilians and cops. And that makes it so the drug war now kills more people than drugs itself. The solution to the problem has now become worse than the actual problem. That's the problem. Let me make this clear. Illegalizing drugs made the drug cartels, right? Illegalizing alcohol back in the day made the mafia. Imagine what illegalizing cigarettes would do. It would create a cigarette cartel. The businesses would dry up and leave while cartels come in to supply people with cigarettes. And make no mistake, those cartels will be brutal. And it's scary because that's what happens when you illegalize stuff. That's what happens when you do prohibition. Imagine what happens if you banned guns again, like all of them. It would create another cartel. It would create a gun cartel. It's something so scary that I don't even want to fathom. So please don't ban guns. You may say, well, that didn't happen in Australia or other countries. Well, because they don't have as many guns as us. We have 500 million guns in the United States of America. We have more guns than people. It's a little different. Point is, prohibition and banning things doesn't work anyways. Why doesn't it work? When you make something illegal, you make it risky. When you make something risky, you make it lucrative and expensive, and you make it pay well. This is why gangbangers and drug cartels do what they do. It's because you made it illegal and you made it very profitable. The solution is very simple, is just keep things legal. You know what happens to drug cartels and the mafia, and their product goes from being illegal to legal? You then take all the risk out of their job, and therefore they don't have to kill people to stay out of prison. They essentially become regular businessmen, and that's good. They become like the tobacco industry, where they openly tell you they sell a product that will kill you. So you make the choice whether or not you want that product. It's way better than creating a drug cartel that will also kill people on top of that. Alright, this next one's a big topic. Without big government, who will protect us from the guns? The answer is the same thing that protects us from guns now. Other guns. The government puts on the mainstream media every morning that there's like 450 mass shootings a year in America. Sometimes they say 500. That is just simply not true. You look at their cited statistics, in 80% of those cases, not a single person died, and most of the rest are good guys shooting bad guys in home invasions. Or they include police killings where they kill bad guys. Both situations are self-defense cases. Yes, they include self-defense cases as mass shootings. It's freaking ridiculous. So if there's a liquor store robbing where this guy comes in with a gun and he shoots 3 people in the foot, that's still considered a mass shooting, even though it was a liquor store robbing. It wasn't a freaking mass shooting at all. It's a big difference, right? But they don't care. They don't care about that difference. Or they'll say there's a self-defense situation where a woman has a gun and she shoots the robbers, 3 of them, in the foot. What happens then? Oh yeah, mass shooting. It's a mass shooting. It's considered one. Even though it was a good guy stopping a bad guy. And it had nothing to do with the mass shooting whatsoever. They even include attempted mass shootings as mass shootings, even if they were prevented. For example, so like somebody gets shot in the shoulder, somebody gets shot in the leg, somebody gets shot in the elbow. Let's say immediately afterwards it's stopped by a citizen, right, with a gun, and he stops the whole thing, and nobody dies. But that's still considered a mass shooting. Let that sink in. Attempted, failed mass shooting is considered a mass shooting still. Jesus Christ. You may be asking yourself, how did things get so screwed up? Well, it used to be 3 or more dead was a mass shooting, which makes sense to me because there's bodies, right? There's actual dead people. That's a mass shooting. A mass shooting to me is multiple dead bodies. And if there isn't above 3, it's not a mass shooting. But to them, they wanted to inflate the numbers, so they lowered the requirement. They lowered the requirement to 3 or more injured. So not even a single person has to die for it to be considered a mass shooting. So now suddenly the number went from 3 mass shootings a year to 500 or whatever, because literally everything's considered a mass shooting now. 3 people jumping on a trampoline get injured. Mass shooting. Just kidding. But it do be like that though. And make no mistake, it's not about controlling the guns. It's about controlling you, so the parasitic ruling class could rule you. Remember in the beginning of the video where I told you that there was 200 million people killed by governments? You know what they did first before they killed their citizens? They almost always took away the guns first. in about every friggin' case. So please be one of the ones that learn from history and actually do not give up your guns ever under any circumstance. Also, there's like 70 homicides a day in America with guns, according to the left. That sounds like a lot until you figure out nearly 70% of those are suicides and the rest are self-defense killings by cops and good guys. And the very little left over are actual murders. And those murders are usually in crime-ridden areas where guns are impossible to get legally. The crime rate is rampant. In other words, states that trust government a little bit too much. Realize this too, your media is controlled by the government. The government literally sends scripts to all the major mainstream media platforms and they read it off to their audience verbatim. So everything you hear from the news is completely scripted from the government itself. None of it's real. I mean, they might be reporting some things that are real, but it's all manipulated by government's point of view. So you're hearing biased information when you're thinking you're hearing unbiased information from lots of different sources. No, you're hearing biased information from one source, and that is government. And that is very important to know. Almost everything you know is a lie, especially if you trust government. Anarchy doesn't mean chaos, by the way, and no rules. Your rulers would like you to think it does, but anarchy doesn't mean that. Anarchy just means no rulers, not no rules. Anyways, did anything from this video make sense to you? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching.
Let me tell you a very important tale. Once upon a time, there was a society, a forest of trees. The forest and every single tree within that forest was held accountable for all of its actions. But some feared that someday the trees would forcibly take over the other trees, even though none of them had any more rights or power than the other. They were on equal ground and safe from anyone having the ability to rule them. But this fear got the best of them, and they hired a ruling class to keep them safe called the Axes. The axe was held high above the rest and was held accountable to nobody. The axe would take what it wanted, when it wanted, make the rules, chop any tree, and the forest would just simply call that order, and was just the price of living in a civilized forest. Because the axe convinced the forest, without the axe, the forest would be cut down by its fellow trees. But deep down, the forest knew its fellow trees are equal and didn't have the divine ruling power of a powerful axe, and if it wasn't for the axe, they would not only all be equal, but they would be finally free from the rule of a tyrannical ruling class known as the axe. To keep the forest completely blind to this obvious fact, the Axes devised a very clever plan. To stay in power, the Axes would often promise free stuff, which was then forcibly stolen from other trees with the threat of being chopped down, and then the Axes would then give the free stuff to those who vote for them. The incentive of free things viciously helped the Axes keep power by rewarding those who surrender power over to the Axes and let the Axes rule them. Most importantly, this kept the trees hostile to anyone who opposes the Axes and their tyrannical grip on society. Because if anyone tried to overthrow the Axes, they unfortunately could no longer receive things for free. The Axes often lended out their abusive power to those who would vote for them, allowing others to act on their greed and steal from other neighboring trees. If not that, steal their rights and to force their fellow neighboring trees to live exactly like them. The trees grew accustomed to and even addicted to stealing the rights of their fellow trees. There was an obvious problem that no one in society was blind to. The rights of the trees in the forest were quickly all vanishing. The amount of labor they needed to do to afford things drastically increased. Over time, something became viciously apparent. The forest was shrinking extremely fast, but the trees kept voting for the wicked axe. For the axe was very clever and convinced the trees that because his handle was made of wood, he was just one of them. And they were now in constant debt to other neighboring forests. But the Axes convinced the trees they would never have to pay this debt because it's just far too high and just to ignore it and lash out at anyone who finds it concerning. Also, the Axes taught that the deforestation of society was actually not a bad thing, but in fact was a good thing. The axes told the trees they were striving more than ever. They called the blatant deforestation of society axonomics. And they should be not only happy, they should be unbelievably thankful that they have the axes around. There was something very unfortunate going on that no one was paying attention to. The entirety of the forest wasn't wise to the fact both sides were equally losing rights and limbs. And in the end, no one really had any rights on either side. The problem the forest didn't notice was the enemy wasn't one set of trees versus the other, but in fact was the axes that ruled over them, and we're held accountable to no one. And no one was winning but the axes. Very unfortunately, the trees didn't take notice of this obvious truth until it was far too late. Timber! And the last tree crashes hard to the ground.